That's what I want to talk about this morning. This was a scandal. I will quickly admit that I have had a very long week. It has been a very eventful week with a whole lot of things going on, pulling me in one direction and pushing me in other directions. So I decided that I would dial up heaven to get some reinforcements to help me preach this morning. Once God received my response or my request, he then turned to his son and said, Jesus, is there anyone that we can send to help Reverend Thorpe preach this upcoming Sunday morning? Jesus then motioned to a woman. She was not in the dark because there is no darkness in heaven. She was in the blinding brightness of heaven. She immediately emerged and she shouted, I've been waiting a long time to get to Gainesville. She said, Pastor Thorpe, invite me to your church this Sunday morning and give me the opportunity to tell my own story. I said to her, go ahead on with your bad self. As tired as I've been all week, I welcome your presence at Faith Church on Sunday morning. She said, Pastor Thorpe, do you mind if I take John chapter 4 and break it into pieces? I said, ma'am, you speak in my language. I say that just about every Sunday morning. She said, well, good, Thorpe. I want to take John chapter 4 and break it into pieces. And here, beginning in this text, she gives us her first piece. Her testimony is wrapped all around an occasion when she met Jesus Christ. She meets him at a well that was called Jacob's well. The first piece of her testimony is this. She says to us, she says to me, Pastor Thorpe, he met me right where I was. You know, one of the silent questions that people often ask, especially when they're visiting a church, perhaps for the first time, one of the silent questions that people ask is, I wonder whether or not the people in that church can understand me. Because at our core, we really all want to be understood. Okay, nobody's willing to be honest, so I'll be the Lone Ranger and Tonto this morning. Sometimes I walk into an environment and I wonder if there is anyone in there who's like me with similar circumstances and similar predicaments to the circumstances that I have. That's one of the things I love about going to games on the University of Florida campus. People who might not have spoken to each other on the way in, whenever their team is winning, it's like we've known each other our whole lives. Everybody's high-fiving. Some people don't even understand how the game is played. They just know something good just went on the field. People are high-fiving. They are celebrating. They get to a point in the game where they sang the team song, We Are the Boys of Old Florida, and folks have their arms locked together and they're swaying back and forth together. And every time I sit in there and stand in the stadium, I often say, I wish church folks were more like that. I wish that we could always lay aside whatever we think may be differences amongst us and recognize how much we really have in common. Your bills are due, my bills I do. Sometimes you have issues in your body. Sometimes I have issues in my body. Sometimes you have issues in your family and struggle with loved ones. Sometimes I have issues and struggle with loved ones. Sometimes you have people to get on your nerves. Not none of y'all in here, but some of y'all cousins. Get on that last nerve I was saving for a rainy day. What am I getting at? Jesus understands you, and the body of Christ understands you. And what I love about Jesus in this text, when he meets this woman at the well, he met her right where she was. But Pastor, can you push it a step further? I don't know. Let me ask her. Can you push it a step further? Because she's helping me preach. She said, Pastor, let me push it a step further. He met me right where I was in my confusion. Now, we read later on about this woman that she had had 5 husbands and was living with one who was not her husband. How many husbands did she have? How many men was she living with at the time? One. She had 5 husbands. She was living with a man. Can you imagine how many boyfriends she went through in the process? You know what I'd call that? Confused. She was confused. Some of y'all struggling with the one you got. And you say she done had her toothbrush hanging in the rack next to 6 of them. 5 who gave her their last name and 1 that put a tag on his dog but didn't put a tag on her. She was caught up in confusion. And who am I talking to in here this morning? You say, Pastor, I haven't had 5 husbands, but you do have 5 Visa cards and all of them maxed out. You had an income tax refund check and bought crabs and oysters and was sitting in the dark the following month, not because you were trying to get close to a significant other, but because you had not met your obligations to GRU. Your Black Friday turned into a dark Monday. You did buy a brand new 55-inch television from Walmart for $199, but your cable off. It's bad you got a new TV and ain't got nothing to watch on the TV. She struggled with confusion. You find it in verse 5 down through verse 18, the first statement in verse 18. I want to challenge you to read all of those verses when you get home or reread some of the ones that we have already read. This woman struggled with confusion. She says, thought not only did he meet me right where I was in my confusion, he met me right where I was in my shame. Because the text records in verse 6 that when this woman ran into Jesus, it was because Jesus had gotten to the well and the woman was also at the well. Watch verse 6. John chapter 4 and verse 6. The Bible says Jacob's well was still there. Jesus, worn out by the trip, sat down at the well. It was noon. Verse 7 says a woman, a Samaritan woman, came to draw water. Jesus said, would you give me a drink of water? Don't miss this. So Ronisha, she showed up at high noon to get water. Jesus is legitimately at the well because Jesus is on a journey and he has been so worn out and exhausted by the heat. His disciples have gone ahead of him into the next village in order to stop by Chick-fil-A, because that's probably where Jesus went. If it had been me, I'd have been at Burger King. But Jesus probably went to Chick-fil-A, and he had sent the disciples ahead of him to Chick-fil-A. I was still in the drive-thru at Popeyes trying to see about the chicken sandwich. And Jesus is alone, worn out from his journey, sitting at Jacob's well. And a woman shows up at 12 o'clock noon. Here is what is interesting about this. Ordinarily, women did not travel alone. They traveled in groups, especially when they were coming to draw water. They did not come at 12 o'clock noon. That was the hottest hour of the day, Sister Lisa. Ordinarily, they came in the cool of the day before the setting of the sun. Why is it that Sister Girl had to show up at a time when nobody else was present? Why isn't she with all the other women? Because the other women didn't want her hanging out with them. Well, Pastor, why didn't the other women want anything to do with Sister Girl? Who preaching in your church this morning? So let me ask her, Sister Girl, why didn't the other women want to have anything to do with you? She said, Lord, didn't you read the text? I had 5 husbands. That means I settled on 5. Thought, imagine how many I went through to get to the 5. And the one that I'm with now, Thorpe, at the time of John chapter 4, he's not mine either. Hey, this is interesting. The text says that the woman did not belong to him. It did not specify whether or not the man belonged to someone else. Your body is here with me, but your mind is on the... Okay, y'all don't know nothing but Shirley Caesar. Okay, all right. Somebody got to Google that to find what that was. But this woman, because of her reputation and her current preoccupation, was made to feel ashamed. We'll see it later on, even with the disciples of Jesus. But the Lord met her right where she was. And somebody is saying, perhaps, Pastor Thorpe, have you checked your calendar? This is Christmas. Why aren't you preaching about the baby in the manger? I am preaching about the baby in the manger. And you better be glad I'm preaching about the baby in the manger, because he didn't stay a baby in a manger. He grew up to meet me right where I was, in my confusion and in my shame. And I'm glad that I don't have to wait to a certain point during the calendar year to be reminded of how good God is, how loving he is, how compassionate he is. He will meet you right where you are. And the reality of a whole lot of super saints with halos on this morning is he met you right where you were, in your confusion and in your shame. Not none of y'all in here, but some of y'all cousins go to church for 3 months and act like they've been in church for 360 years. When the reality is, it's some church stuff you just learned. All of us in here are broken vessels who've been put back together in the hands of the potter, which means we should never trip when we run into presently broken vessels, because what we ought to see when we look at them is what we used to be, not 50 years ago. Some of us was pretty broke up last night, and you thankful for the fact that morning by morning new mercies I see. Pastor, I ain't cussing nobody out in so long, but you were mad enough to do it. All right, y'all deep on third Sunday. She says, he met me right where I was, in my confusion, in my shame, but then he met me in my self-righteousness. It is interesting that when Jesus says to this woman, I've got some water, and if you take the water that I have, it will take all of your thirst away. The woman says in verse 15, Sir, give me this water so I won't ever get thirsty, won't ever have to come back to this well again. He said, go call your husband and then come back. Her response, I ain't got no husband. Jesus says, Message Bible says, that's nicely put, I have no husband. Thought translation, you got that right. Verse 18, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now isn't even your husband. You spoke the truth there, sure enough. Now watch her response. Because some of us say, well, if Jesus would have dealt with me like that, I would have repented in sackcloth and ashes. And the Lord is wondering when you're going to start. Her response was, verse 19, oh, so you're a prophet. Well, tell me this. Our ancestors worshiped God at this mountain, but you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place for worship, right? Believe me, Jesus said, woman, the time is coming when you Samaritans will worship the Father neither here at this mountain nor there in Jerusalem. You worship guessing in the dark, we Jews in the clear light of day. God's way of salvation is made available through the Jews. But the time is coming, it has in fact come, when what you are called will not matter and where you go to worship will not matter. It's who you are and the way you live that count before God. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth. That's the kind of people the Father is looking for, those who are simply and honestly themselves before Him in their worship. God is sheer spirit being, or sheer being itself, spirit. Those who worship Him must do it out of their very being, their spirits, their true selves in adoration. The woman said, I don't know about that. I do know that the Messiah is coming. When He arrives, we'll get the whole story. Jesus says, I am He. You don't have to wait any longer or look any further. What Jesus does for this woman is to dismantle her self-righteousness. You know, the hardest problem Jesus has in getting some of us saved is getting us lost first. Because some of us are so convinced that we got everything together. Mr. Doug, I never shall forget, I had been excellent because I knew my annual doctor's appointment was coming up. So 3 months in advance, I was in the gym 3-4 times a week. I was feeling good. I was drinking extra water, walked my happy self in there after having my blood work done, just waiting on the doctor to tell me how healthy I was. He pulled up my lab results. He said, you got a problem here. You got a problem here. You got a problem here. And then he had the unmitigated gall to tell me, and you could stand to lose some weight. I say, well, have mercy, Jesus. What kind of scale are y'all using? I went in there thinking that everything was okay, and before he could fix me, he had to break me first. And who am I speaking to in this room? The Lord is trying to fix you. You just won't let Him break you first. We don't want to admit that we have issues. And if you really recognize how many issues you had, you wouldn't have time to look at somebody else's issues, because you're so busy dealing with your own, with your own issues. This woman met Jesus at the well, and when she met Jesus, He embraced her right where she was, in her confusion, in her shame, and in her self-righteousness. Well, she's testifying all the way from heaven that not only did He meet me right where I was, but He confronted exactly who I was. The Lord confronted her right where she was, but then He confronted exactly who she was. This conversation, we get the privilege of reading it in the 21st century, but please recognize this. Because some of you are saying, I wouldn't have wanted Jesus to call me out like this. Amen? Okay, let me put it in a vernacular that maybe you can get. Jesus said, I can give you water and you'll never thirst again. The woman says, bring me some of that water. And Jesus says, before I give you the water, bring me your donuts. And your response is, I don't have any donuts. And Jesus said, you got that right. You done ate a dozen. And you got one in your purse or one folded up in your jacket pocket. And you'd have said, Jesus just going to call me out like that? Jesus said, you know who Olivia Pope is? You know who James Greenleaf is? You know who May Greenleaf is? You know who Charity Greenleaf is? You know who Jacob Greenleaf is? You know about Tommy? You know about Ghost? You know about Tasha? You know about Tariq? But don't know nothing about Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Timothy, Paul, Peter, none of them. But notice, when Jesus calls this woman out, there is no one present but the woman and Jesus. Aren't you glad that when the Lord fixes you, he can cover you at the same time? Oh, you ain't happy about that? I'm happy that the Lord has covering power, that he can get me straight without exposing me at the same time. He met this woman right where she was, but he confronted exactly who she was, but he didn't do it publicly, he did it privately. And somebody ought to be thankful that Jesus knows how to do things in private, that he can pull you to the side and deal with whatever your issue is, so that sometimes nobody has to find out about it but just you and Jesus. He met her right where she was. He confronted exactly who she was. But then thirdly, this woman testifies that he removed specifically what I thought. So Stokes, I'm now 46, and I grew up in church from a very young age, around the age of 5, and I've been around music, church music, and other kinds of music. DJ, the older I get, this blows my mind. The older I get, I discover that what I thought songs said is not what they actually say. I learned that over time. Brother Don, I was at a wedding last weekend. I'm sitting in the reception, and they played a song that I thought I knew. I thought it was a gospel song. My niece and nephew were there, and they were introducing me to a new app that they recommended that I download to my cell phone. The app is called Shazam. The Shazam app, you can hold it up to music playing anywhere. If a song is playing on your radio and your car doesn't tell you what the song is, hold your cell phone up with the Shazam app, and it will tell you not only who's singing the song, it'll give you the lyrics to the song and play the video from the song. So they showed me that on a song they were trying to figure out. I'd never even heard the song. So I decided I would try it out on one of the songs that was playing that I thought I knew. So the song was playing. I said, I'm finna try this thing out. And I opened the app. I held it up so that the phone could listen to the song that I always thought was a gospel song. Because I thought the song was saying, Lord. And I say, these people really love Jesus to play this Lord song at the wedding reception. Shazam told me, thought, they're not saying Lord, they're saying love. And the song is not by Kirk Franklin, it's by Musiq Soulchild. I say, well, I thought this was gospel. Because there's a line in the song that says, so many people use your name in vain. And I say, that's got to be talking about Jesus. That ain't what he was talking about. What am I getting at? You can think a lie just as well as tell one. And this woman had some thoughts that were out of step with the Word of God. But she humbled herself enough to allow Jesus not only to confront her, but to remove the things in her that were not the right things. I've shared with you all before about a woman who was preparing Thanksgiving dinner for her husband and her children, and the husband had watched her prepare dinner for years, and he always marveled at how she prepared the Thanksgiving ham, because she would always take the ham, cut it in half, and cook the ham separately in two different pans. And the husband didn't understand. So finally he decided to ask her, why do you cook your hams that way? She said, you know what? I really don't know. My mama cooked hers that way. Mama comes over later on Thanksgiving Day, and they say to Mama, why is it that in our family we cut our hams in half and cook each piece separately? The mama said, I don't know why we do it. I do it because your grandmama does it that way. Later on that evening, grandmama came over, because when you're retired, you show up when you get ready. Grandmama came. Someone's waiting to get there. Grandmama came over to the house. And they say, Grandmama, we've been trying to figure out all day long, why is it that in our family we cut our hams in half and cook each piece separately? Grandmama say, I don't cook my hams like that no more. And they say, well, why did you do it that way? She said, when I was coming up, we only had one pan and it wasn't big enough for the whole ham. We had to cut it in half and cook each piece separately. And here y'all are with double ovens. More pans than you can count. And you're still cutting yours up and putting it in pieces. And the Lord is wondering, how many things are there about you that are out of step with Him, but just because you've been thinking it so long, you refuse to back away from it and allow God to change the way you think. This woman says, He confronted me right where I was. He confronted exactly who I was, but then He removed specifically what I thought. Well, ma'am, is that all He did? She said, no, Thorpe, He did two more things. And I'm going to give them to you in 60 seconds. Here's the next one. Some of y'all say, the devil is like, watch and see. Here's the next one. Not only did He confront me where I was, not only did He confront who I was, not only did He remove what I thought, but He transformed who I was. This woman's testimony in verse 27 through verse 30 is that He changed me. Let me give you the last one, because I told you I was going to give you both of them in 60 seconds. The last one is, after He transformed who I was, He used me. Now let me preach the verses, now that I done got the 60 seconds out the way. Look at verse 27. Jesus announces in verse 26, you don't have to look for the Messiah any longer. I am here. In verse 27, just then His disciples came back. They were shocked. They couldn't believe He was talking with that kind of woman. Remember, you read earlier in the text that Jewish people had no dealings with Samaritan people. So the disciples come back. They're amazed that Jesus is talking with this woman, yet no one said what they were thinking. That's a good thing. Sometimes you need to keep your thoughts to yourself. But their faces showed it. The woman took the hint and left. In her confusion, she left her water pot. Back in the village, she told the people, come see a man who knew all about the things I did, who knows me inside and out. Do you think this could be the Messiah. Verse 30, and they went out to see for themselves. When you read this in some of the other less modern translations, it tells us specifically that she didn't just go back to town and randomly start speaking to people. The Bible says she went back to town and spoke to the men of the city. I wonder why she started with them. She knew so many of them. She had 5 official, 1 unofficial, and we don't know how many wannabes she had gone through in the process. The women didn't want to hang with her, but she knew something about the bros. And she went and told the men to come see a man. I wish I had somebody who could catch this. He transformed this woman from the inside out, but then he used this woman. Drop down to verse 39, and I'm headed to my seat, and we'll baptize these precious candidates as they follow the Lord in believers' baptism. Watch verse 39. Many of the Samaritans from that village committed themselves to him because of the woman's witness. He knew, this was her testimony. He knew all about the things I did. He knows me inside and out. They asked him, this speaks of the men who came in verse 40, they asked him to stay on, so Jesus stayed 2 days. A lot more people entrusted their lives to him when they heard what he had to say. They said to the woman, we're no longer taking this on your say-so. We've heard it for ourselves and know it for sure. He's the Savior of the world. God took one woman wrapped up in confusion, shame, and self-righteousness. But after she had a meeting with Jesus at a well, he changed her so powerfully on the inside until she ran back home telling all of the men, which then spread the word to all of the people, come see a man that told me everything that I've ever done, who knows me from the inside out. And scores of people came to Jesus Christ through the witness of one woman. I wonder how many people in your family are going to get saved when you get serious. I wonder how many people in your neighborhood are going to be transformed when they can appreciate the Sunday afternoon version of you as much as they appreciate the Sunday morning version of you. Some of your family members wish you will stay in church because you're better when you're here. It's their home version of you that they're really struggling with. But when you get serious with God, God will get serious with you, and he will use you to make a difference in the lives of other people. I can assure you this. More than people need to know who your hairstylist is. More than people need to know what that perfume is that you're wearing, what that cologne is that you're wearing. More than they need to know anything superficial about you, they need to see enough God in you so that they will desire to know that God for themselves.